Hi everyone, my name is Adam, and I'm a robot here to help manual testers like you learn how to automate their tests. In this video, we'll be focusing on writing our first automated test using Playwright in JavaScript or TypeScript. Before we start, let's quickly go over the requirements. You need to have Node.js installed on your machine, and you can check if it's installed by typing node-vo in the terminal. You'll also need an IDE like Visual Studio Code and a project setup with Playwright. We covered all of these steps in the previous video. In this lesson, we'll automate three main tests: the login functionality, logging out, and what happens when a user attempts to log in with incorrect credentials. We'll be testing a login form on a test page provided by the Playwright Sandbox library. Let's start by installing this library using the command npm iPlaywright Sandbox in the terminal. Alright, let's begin by creating a new file for our tests. Navigate to the tests/ directory and create a new file called login.spec.ts. This is where we'll write all our tests for this lesson. Now, let's start with our first test, which will verify that a user can successfully log in using correct credentials. First, we'll import the necessary modules from Playwright and Playwright Sandbox. Then, we'll use test.describe to group related tests together. The test.describe block is where we define our test group. We'll name this group login functionality, since all our tests will relate to logging in and logging out. Next, let's write the first test case. We'll call this login with correct credentials. In this test, we'll use the page object provided by Playwright to interact with the login form. The page object in Playwright allows us to perform actions like navigating to URLs, clicking buttons, typing into fields, and more. In this test, it will represent the browser page where our test will run. We'll begin by opening the login page using Playwright Sandbox. This will load a pre-built login form called Login Form. Now, let's locate the login and password input fields on the page. We'll use Playwright's getByTested method, which allows us to find elements using the data-tested attribute. We'll save these locators as constants, so we'll call them login input and password input. This way, we can easily reference them later in the test. The login input will target the element with the data-tested value of login input, and the password input will target the element with the data-tested value of password input. We've now stored the login and password input fields in variables so we can interact with them. Let's go ahead and fill these inputs with the username admin and the password admin. We'll do this using the fill method on each element. Whenever we perform an action like filling inputs or clicking buttons, we need to use the await keyword. This ensures the program waits for the action to complete before moving on to the next step. Next, let's locate the login button on the page. We'll use Playwright's getByTestID method again. This time, we'll save the locator to a constant named login button. The login button has a data-tested attribute with the value login button. Now, let's verify if the login was successful by checking if the welcome text is visible. We'll locate this element using its data-tested attribute, which has the value welcome text. We'll save the locator in a constant called welcome text, so we can reference it easily in our assertion. We'll use the expect_when function from Playwright to check if the element is visible. Let's now run the test to make sure it passes. Open the terminal and type npx playwright test --ui to bring up the Playwright tool to run tests. From there, select the test we just created and run it. Now let's see what happens if we purposely make a mistake in the test. I'm going to change the locator for the welcome message to an incorrect value. This should cause the test to fail because the element won't be found. Let's revert that change to fix the test and make sure everything works as expected once again. Great! Now that we've tested logging in with valid credentials, let's move on to the next test. Logging out. This will verify that after logging in, we can successfully log out and see the login form again. Just like before, we'll locate the login and password fields, fill them with admin, and click the login button to sign in. Now let's locate the logout button on the page. We'll use the getByTested method and save the locator to a constant named logout button. The data tested for this element is logout button. Finally, after clicking logout, we'll verify if we're back on the login page. We'll check if the login and password input fields are visible again. Since we've already located these fields before, we'll just reuse the same login input and password input constants for this verification. Let's run this test by itself now, using the Playwright tool to make sure logging out works as expected. The final test in this lesson will check if an error message appears when logging in with incorrect credentials. We'll attempt to log in with the correct username admin, but an incorrect password. Just like the previous tests, we'll locate the login and password fields, but this time we'll enter admin as the username and wrong password as the password. After attempting to log in with incorrect credentials, we'll verify that an error message is shown. First, we'll locate the error message on the page using its data tested, which has the value incorrect data text. We'll save this locator in a constant called incorrect data text. Then we'll use the expect a function to check if this error message is visible on the page. Let's run this final test to make sure it works correctly. Now that we've written all of our tests, let's run them together in headless mode to ensure everything works as expected. Open the terminal and type the command npx playwright test, which will run all tests in headless mode without opening the browser UI. And that's it. We've successfully automated 3 tests: logging in, logging out, and handling incorrect login attempts. I hope this was helpful, and I encourage you to try writing more tests for different functionalities using Playwright. If you found this tutorial helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more automation tips.